he goes on to talk about how I got to read this. So he goes to this, what's called a change of command, which is when, I'm in charge, but I'm going to give you the battalion. Gotcha. So the following day, I took over the battalion from Lieutenant Colonel Franklin A. Hart in a parade field change of command in the middle of the Mekong Delta. What kind of war have I gotten myself into, I wondered. A perfectly starched General Ewell was there, having flown in for the occasion in his polished choppers. There were other brass too, and photographers, the American flag, but the battalion colors, which were ceremoniously passed on to me. And all this before the scroungiest, most spiritless assembly of soldiers I'd ever seen. Incredibly, none of the generals or colonels seemed to notice the slack condition of my new charges or their positions. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Hart would still receive a Legion of Merit for his job well done with the battalion. So picture that in your mind. You're taking over this battalion. These guys are just complete disaster. The generals show up in their polished helicopters wearing starched uniforms, and they just ignore. It's like they're got blinders on. They're just ignoring the fact that these guys are just a total disaster. Crazy thoughts. Crazy thoughts. So, then we get into the point where, and this is where when we get these questions on Twitter about leadership, and this is sort of what drew me back to thinking about talking about this book, was because as we get these questions, you end up with a just really great examples, and a lot of the questions that we get are, what do you do with people that are unmotivated? What do you do when, and everyone has that question of what do you do when people are unmotivated? And I'll tell you, can you imagine if there's anyone less motivated than a conscript, a draftee from Vietnam, from the Vietnam War? It's kind of crazy. Yeah, no problem. One of the things that Hack says is, little could I have guessed that whipping it into shape, meaning the battalion, would require every little bit of knowledge I'd gained in the interim. So his whole career, he realized his whole career, he's going to have to take every trick that he'd learned to get these guys into shape. Now, what's interesting about this is he says whipping these guys into shape. And this is something I've had executives when I get on with the CEO, and he'll say, I need you to come in here and whip my guys into shape. Right. And it's one of those quotes that I have to push back on, because they think I'm going to come in there like a drill instructor and bark orders, and people are going to, and it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. And you have to do more than that. So when one of the initial things that he did was institute discipline. And as you know, discipline is one of my favorite words. Going back to the book here. From the outset, I realized that to make this unit an effective military force, I'd have to implement about 1,000 changes. So I'd figured we'd start with 5 a day. Little things, basic things, like wear your steel pot helmet, and clean and carry your rifle at all times. And ammunition will not be worn Pancho Villa style. My first order was that come darkness, the fire support base perimeter would pull back 300 meters. The troops instantly began to grumble at this. But it was the next order that really began the mutinous feeling within my hard luck outfit. Anything you can't carry 24 hours a day is gone on the next chopper. So here are these guys that were living in tents that had toilets out there, radios, and all this stuff. And he said, anything you can't carry with you is out of here. That's hardcore discipline. And they piled it all up in the middle of the middle of the base and had a big helicopter come in and take it out. Now, one thing he says here is I wasn't there to have them like me. And this is one of those dichotomies where, and I'm sure everybody at one point or another has worked for someone that is very abrasive and thinks they can just throw orders around, and no one likes working for that guy. It's awful.
Yeah.
And so there's a fine line between, listen, I'm not here to make friends, and, oh, I'm just going to be totally abrasive and treat everyone like crap, because you're not going to get people to follow you with that attitude. Yeah. So he obviously was very good at walking that fine line between pushing hard enough where he's like, hey, I'm not here to make friends, but at the same time, not pushing him so hard that he's getting shot or there's a complete mutiny against him.
Yeah, you'd think that someone who in my experience, when people say that, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to whatever, it's usually kind of like an excuse because they piss somebody off.
Yeah.
So I think that to really use that in an accurate way, or in a conducive way, I'm not here to make friends, is if you can show them results and at the same time not necessarily, be the nicest of guys, then I think that's when you start to walk that fine line.
So it's beautiful that you said that. So this goes right into the fact that a short time later, so after they pulled back this perimeter, so every night, instead of staying where they were, just all relaxed, they packed up, they pulled back, they dug in. A short time later, we were hit with a barrage of rocket and recoilless rifle fire, but most of it fell on the old positions. When I got on the horn and called for artillery, I was surprised. I was very nervous. Command is not like hopping back onto a bicycle, and after 2.5 years away from it, I was rusty and actually scared I'd screw up. But then I heard a guy, later to be identified as Lieutenant Larry Toller, who worked in the S3 section, running behind me to his defensive position. And here's the quote from this guy. He's a mean son of a bitch, but he knows what he's doing. So that's exactly what you just said. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what effect it had. Now, moving through this, the men, and now he's talking about this unit, the 439, the men of the 439 had no unit identity and no pride in themselves. So for all those people that are out there that have sent me Twitter questions saying, hey, how do I deal with people that are unmotivated? How do I change? There's another one. How does culture change? He's going to go into that. As a first step toward rectifying this, I decided to call my hard luck battalion the Hardcore and the troops Racondos. So he's renaming them. Mm-hmm. He's renaming the battalion.